Stop. If you skip this video, you'll repeat the same mistake ancient emperors made, and they paid for it with entire dynasties. Don't let this play in the background. Listen carefully, because if money is silently shaping your decisions, then you are not free. And until you see this truth, you will never regain control. You believe you control money. Ancient China would call that a dangerous illusion. Thousands of years ago, Chinese court scholars noticed something unsettling. When people gained wealth, their thinking didn't improve. It narrowed. They rushed decisions, trusted the wrong people, became afraid of losing what they had. Power didn't make them wiser, it made them reactive. What's shocking is this. They had no neuroscience, no brain scans, only observation. Yet modern science now confirms what they already knew. Money activates the same areas of the brain linked to survival and addiction. It doesn't just sit in your bank account. It quietly hijacks your attention, emotions, and judgment. Here's a question I want you to answer in the comments. Be honest. If your income doubled overnight, do you believe your decisions would stay the same, or would they change? Ancient thinkers believed most people underestimate this effect. They don't realize money doesn't control you loudly. It controls you subtly through fear, urgency, and desire. And ancient China developed methods to break this invisible control. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to my channel so you never miss these life-changing insights. And now let's step into the story, where ancient Chinese masters reveal the hidden ways money can quietly control your thoughts, your choices, and even your life. In ancient China, certain scholars and generals were deliberately restricted from holding excessive wealth. To outsiders, it seemed unfair. Why limit someone's riches when they had earned them? But philosophers understood something most people didn't. Money alters perception. When someone lacks money, fear dominates their thinking. They avoid risk, suppress ambition, and cling to security. When someone has excess money, a different danger appears: overconfidence. They begin to mistake financial power for intelligence. They trust their instincts too much. They ignore warnings. They confuse luck with skill. Court records describe emperors who started wars not because they were necessary, but because wealth made them feel invincible. Others accepted humiliation and bad treaties simply because they feared losing their treasury. In both cases, money wasn't the tool, it was the master. The same pattern exists today. You choose safety over growth. You stay silent when speaking up could change your life. You abandon long-term goals for short-term financial comfort. Not because you are weak, but because money is influencing your thinking from behind the scenes. Ancient Chinese masters warned, when the heart clings to gold, the mind loses balance. But they didn't stop there. They also discovered how to use money without being ruled by it. And in Chapter 2, you'll see how money literally rewires your decision-making center, and how ancient China trained minds to resist it. Ancient Chinese thinkers believed the mind was like water. Calm water reflects truth. Disturbed water distorts reality. Money, they said, is one of the strongest disturbances. Centuries ago, Taoist scholars noticed a strange pattern. Two people could face the same situation, same risks, same information, but reach completely different decisions depending on their relationship with wealth. The other would rush. One would see long-term consequences. The other would chase immediate gain. They didn't call it psychology. They called it loss of inner balance. Modern science now explains what they only observe. When money enters a decision, the brain shifts control away from rational evaluation and toward emotional survival systems. Fear of loss becomes louder than logic. Desire for gain becomes stronger than patience. The mind starts asking, what can I get right now? Instead of what is wise? Ancient China understood this without brain scans. That's why merchants were trained differently from scholars. Scholars were taught to slow the mind. Merchants were warned to guard it, because once urgency takes over, wisdom disappears. Think about how money decisions feel today. Why do people panic sell during financial crashes? Why do smart individuals chase trends they don't understand? Why do people work harder but feel more anxious than ever? Because money introduces speed into the mind. Ancient texts describe speed as the enemy of clarity. The faster the mind moves, the easier it is to manipulate. This is why emperors who rush decisions collapse dynasties. They mistook urgency for intelligence. Money doesn't control you by force. It controls you by rushing you when you feel pressured to act quickly. Buy now, invest now, work harder now. That's when judgment weakens. Ancient Chinese masters trained themselves to pause deliberately before any financial decision. Not to reject money, but to remove its emotional leverage. They believed the most dangerous sentence was, "I'll decide quickly," because quick decisions feel powerful. But they are usually reactive. This is why wealth often creates anxiety instead of peace. The more money someone has, the more decisions feel urgent. Protect it, grow it, don't lose it. The mind never rests. Ancient philosophy taught that true control over money begins with control over tempo. Slow mind, slow decisions. Urgency fades. Clarity returns. Here's a question I want you to answer in the comments. Be honest with yourself. When was the last time money made you rush a decision you later questioned? Most people don't realize this pattern because it feels normal. Society rewards speed. Markets reward action. But ancient China valued something different: deliberate restraint. They believed the person who could pause while others rushed would always win in the long run. But here's where the story gets deeper, because ancient China didn't just teach people to slow down. They taught them how to separate identity from wealth. And once that separation happens, money loses its psychological grip completely. In Chapter 3, you'll discover how ancient Chinese masters prevented money from becoming their identity, and why most modern people unknowingly fuse the two. Ancient Chinese philosophers believed there was a line most people cross without noticing. On one side of the line, money is a tool. On the other side, money becomes identity. The moment that line is crossed, control is lost. Confucian scholars warned that wealth was most dangerous not when it was scarce, but when it became tied to a person's sense of worth. They observed that once people began measuring themselves by income, possessions, or status, their behavior changed completely. Pride replaced humility. Fear replaced clarity. Comparison replaced contentment. They called this state of the borrowed self. A borrowed self lives through numbers. More money means more confidence. Less money means shame, anxiety, and self-doubt. Ancient records describe officials who made brilliant decisions when their wealth was stable, but became reckless or submissive when their financial status shifted. Their intelligence didn't change. Their identity did. Modern psychology explains this clearly. When money becomes part of identity, every financial fluctuation feels personal. A loss feels like failure. A gain feels like validation. This emotional attachment hijacks judgment. Ancient China taught that the mind cannot remain balanced when identity depends on external symbols. This is why Taoist masters lived simply, even when they had access to wealth. Not because money was evil, but because detachment preserved clarity. They believed that if money defined you, then money owned you. Think about modern life. People introduce themselves by job title. They measure success by income. They feel invisible without financial status. Without realizing it, they fuse identity with wealth. And once identity is fused, fear becomes permanent. Fear of falling behind. Fear of losing status. Fear of being exposed. Ancient Chinese wisdom warned that a fearful mind is easy to control, not only by money, but by rulers, markets, and other people. That is why emperors surrounded themselves with advisors who lived modestly. A wealthy advisor could be bought. A status-hungry advisor could be manipulated. But a detached advisor spoke truth without fear. They understood something timeless. The person who needs money to feel whole can never think freely. Here's a question I want you to answer honestly in the comments. If your income dropped tomorrow, would your sense of self drop with it? Most people don't want to answer that question. But ancient Chinese masters insisted on facing it directly. They trained themselves to separate who they were from what they owned. Only then could they make clear financial decisions without emotional interference. But separation alone wasn't enough, because even a detached mind can still be tempted. Ancient China developed a deeper discipline, one that controlled desire itself. And once desire was mastered, money lost its power completely. In Chapter 4, you'll discover the ancient method used to control desire before it controls you, and why this lesson is more dangerous than it sounds. Ancient Chinese masters believed desire was louder than hunger, stronger than fear, and more dangerous than ignorance. They didn't try to destroy desire. They trained it. In Taoist teachings, desire was described as a fire. When controlled, it provides warmth and direction. When uncontrolled, it spreads and consumes everything. Money, they believed, was the fastest fuel for that fire. Court records tell of ministers who began their service humble and disciplined. Over time, as wealth increased, desire quietly expanded, first for comfort, then for status, then for influence. Eventually, decisions were no longer made for wisdom, but for preservation of advantage. The mistake was never money itself. The mistake was letting desire lead. Ancient Chinese masters noticed that desire does not announce itself loudly. It disguises itself as ambition, responsibility, even necessity. I need more to be secure. I deserve this. This is just being practical. But beneath these thoughts was always the same force: attachment. Taoist training focused on creating space between impulse and action. When desire appeared, the practitioner did nothing. No reaction, no suppression, just observation. They believe the moment you act immediately on desire, you surrender authority over your mind. This is why patience was considered power. In financial matters, this discipline was ruthless. Before any major decision, masters would delay action, not for hours, but sometimes for days. They allowed emotional intensity to fade. When desire quieted, clarity emerged. Modern society teaches the opposite. Act fast. Don't miss out. Hesitation is weakness. Ancient China saw hesitation as intelligence. They believed the person who could wait while others rushed had already won. Desire thrives on urgency. Remove urgency, and desire weakens. Here's a question I want you to think about and answer honestly in the comments. How many of your biggest financial decisions were made under pressure rather than calm clarity? Most people don't realize how often desire disguises itself as logic. The masters trained themselves to feel desire fully without obeying it. Over time, desire lost its grip. Money stopped pulling the mind in different directions. And something unexpected happened. When desire no longer controlled them, opportunities appeared naturally. They weren't chasing. They were choosing. But there was still one final danger. Even a disciplined mind can fall when surrounded by the wrong environment. Ancient China understood that environment silently shapes behavior, and money amplifies its influence. In Chapter 5, you'll learn how ancient Chinese masters protected themselves from toxic environments, and why this lesson is critical in a world designed to constantly trigger desire. Ancient Chinese masters believed most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because they live inside environments that constantly weaken the mind. They understood something uncomfortable. Court philosophers observed that even disciplined officials became corrupted when surrounded by excess, competition, and comparison. Not instantly. Gradually. Desire was triggered repeatedly until resistance faded. Money magnified this effect. The more wealth circulated in an environment, the more status games emerged. People stopped asking what was right and started asking what looked successful. Decisions were no longer made for wisdom, but for appearance. Ancient China warned that comparison is the most dangerous form of poverty. When you compare, you measure your worth externally. The mind becomes restless. Satisfaction disappears. Desire regenerates endlessly. This is why Taoist masters often withdrew from courts, markets, and crowded cities. Not to escape responsibility, but to protect clarity. They knew the mind mirrors what surrounds it. Look at the modern world. Endless consumption, constant financial comparison, social pressure disguised as motivation. Every signal tells you more, faster, higher. Ancient wisdom would call this an environment designed to manufacture dissatisfaction. Masters trained themselves to limit exposure, not because they feared temptation, but because they respected the mind's limits. They understood that willpower is finite. Environment shapes behavior faster than discipline ever could. Here's a question I want you to answer in the comments. Does your environment push you toward calm, clarity, and long-term thinking, or toward urgency, comparison, and anxiety? Most people never audit their environment. They blame themselves instead. Ancient China taught that real self-mastery begins with choosing where you place your attention. They surrounded themselves with people who spoke slowly, thought deeply, and valued restraint. Money remained present, but not dominant. And once environment was controlled, money lost its emotional noise. Only then could the final lesson be taught. Because there was one ultimate principle, ancient China believed separated those who were ruled by money from those who ruled it. A principle so simple that most people ignore it. In Chapter 6, the final chapter, You'll learn the ancient rule that ends money's control completely, and I'll ask you one final question that will decide whether this wisdom changes your life or not. Ancient China believed there was one rule that decided everything. Not discipline, not intelligence, not even wealth. They called it inner authority. Inner authority meant this: no external thing, money, status, fear, or desire, gets the final vote inside your mind. Masters taught that the moment money decides how you feel, how you act, or how you see yourself, authority is lost. You may still earn, save, and invest, but you are no longer leading. You are reacting. That is why the wisest figures in ancient China never asked, "How much will this make me?" They asked, "Will this disturb my balance?" They believed a disturbed mind could never hold power for long. Dynasties collapsed not because they lacked gold, but because leaders lost inner authority. Fear made them hoard, desire made them reckless, comparison made them blind. The masters who lived peacefully with wealth followed one rule: money may pass through your hands, but it must never sit in your mind. They earned without obsession. They spent without guilt. They lost without panic. Because their identity was not tied to numbers. This is the truth most people never hear. Money doesn't control you because it's powerful. It controls you because you give it emotional authority. The moment you stop letting money decide your worth, your speed, and your peace, its grip weakens. And here's the final question. This one matters. Answer it honestly in the comments. If money disappeared from your life tomorrow, who would you still be? Your answer reveals everything, because the person who knows who they are without money is the only person who will never be controlled by it.